Really good to be together again for our Sunday morning meditation class here, here wherever we are, but here formally, and sometime to return to Tenleytown, Washington, D.C. And it's wonderful to have people from many different places, since all we need is the internet connection to be on together and be able to see or hear each other together. So it's within the Buddhist tradition, one of the three jewels is the jewel of Sangha, or community, and this, I find this a very powerful way of being together when we're not physically together. I feel very grateful that we have this ability to practice together and to kind of reflect together on the teachings, the practices, how we can bring them into our lives, and particularly at a time like this. In recent weeks, I've been beginning a lot with where we are, because that it's such a, it's almost a cliche to say, but an unprecedented time that we're living in. I was just seeing reading an article in the Washington Post from yesterday, and I was struck by it was on mental health, and particularly anxiety and depression, that between 2019 and 2020, once the pandemic really set in here, the rates of anxiety and depression have tripled, from around average of 8-9% to high 20%, 27-28% of different ethnic racial groups, and some disparity, but pretty much, these graphs are really dramatic, just this dramatic rise. In a way, not that surprised, but just maybe a little surprised at how just the level of anxiety and depression among so many. And it is, and in the changes that we're all experiencing are profound, and obviously for some much more much more intense than for others. And then on top of the pandemic and all the uncertainty and kind of worry and fear around that, we have in the last nearly 3 weeks now, really the upheaval, the really uprising in connection with racial justice, coming out of the precipitating cause being the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis, and but touching into kind of a much deeper and longer history, going back 4 centuries, for the history of racial injustice. And another in this report, where they showed that there's been a spike just in the last 2 weeks, particularly among African Americans and Asian Americans, since the killing of George Floyd, that there've been a spike of about 7% in increase in anxiety and depression. So just whole population, millions of people, added worry, fear, perhaps trauma from what's happening right now. So just kind of naming that and reflecting on these practices, these skills that we cultivate, it brings me back to the importance of cultivating, particularly the quality of equanimity in these times. Being able to find a balance, a steadiness in the midst of all of life's changes, and particularly the challenges that we're going through at this time, in these times. And I want to kind of begin with a reflection. As some of you have been part of these efforts in recent weeks, but there's a group of us have been working together to around the elections, November elections here, and we've been focusing our attention on the state of Wisconsin, which has been and is a pivotal battleground state, and will likely play a very important role again in determining whether we have the possibility of a caring and compassionate leadership of government coming out of the elections. And we organized a webinar last Thursday, and some of you I know were at that, took part in that webinar. But the participants were, the hosts really were Tara Brach, Jack Cornfield, very leading well-known teachers in the meditation and mindfulness field, and Van Jones, who's probably many of you know, probably almost everyone may know from CNN, worked in the Obama administration, and now a very recognized commentator and kind of advocate and activist for social justice and social change. And I was very, very taken by the whole of the webinar, but particularly Van Jones. He began by he was saying, I don't think I could have done this webinar a week ago. I was too broken by, as an African American, by the events, by the killing of George Floyd. But something has changed. He said, to me, it's a miracle. It feels like a miracle as an African American man. He said, somebody killed a black man and everyone cares, he said. And as he said that, there were tears coming down his face, his cheeks. Somebody killed a black man and everyone cares. That how moved he was and is by the fact that not just black people, not just people of color care about and believe that Black Lives Matter, but that millions of white people, particularly, have come out on the streets to support the efforts for racial justice, and this movement has already brought about some significant changes in different areas, banning of chokeholds and changes in police departments, and many companies coming out and giving money for the cause of racial justice and changing their policies and saying how much they support equity and diversity and inclusion. And obviously those that needs to be really shown in practice if it leads to real change. And we don't know how much this how real this change is going to be. It's there's always a possibility that something else can happen, or that the situation changes in a significant way, and momentum gets lost, and people, particularly white people, feel like, they can step back and don't need to step up in the same way. So it's not by any means certain. But one of the other things that Van Jones shared that I found kind of powerful was, he said, when in the civil rights movement of the 60s, at the time it was happening, it wasn't called the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement came as a kind of ex post facto description of this period of change, of upheaval, of a very significant social and political change, particularly around human rights and civil rights. He said, Freedom Summer, where many people came down from the north to support the movement, what would be the civil rights movement. Freedom Summer didn't become Freedom Summer till, a couple of years afterwards. Somebody wrote a book and they called it Freedom Summer. Well, the point he was making is we're in the middle of something that's very profound. He called it an awakening, and we don't know how it's going to unfold, and what it's going to look like and what shape it's going to take. And yet we're in the middle of all of this, and of this very significant period of change and upheaval. And I think it's, when we are in the middle of something, we tend not to really know, in some way, not necessarily to be aware that we're in the middle of something that's really significant. But obviously, a pandemic that has only had the nearest parallel to it is 100 years ago. We haven't had anything, like this that's affected really everywhere in the world, like at least an epidemic of this kind. And this time of social upheaval around racial justice as well is profound. And I think most people would say you'd have to go back to the civil rights movement of 50 and 60 years ago to kind of have something, parallel. I'm not saying it's exactly the same, but something important that's going on. And this kind of brings me to the theme of, from the standpoint of these teachings and practices, what we call the Dharma, the teachings of awakening, of freedom. The importance of equanimity is what this, as I'm reflecting on this time that we're living in, this period of upheaval, the importance, the profound, really, importance of the quality of equanimity, of balance, of finding balance in the midst of the kind of the joys and the sorrows and the ups and the downs of life. This quality of balance, of steadiness in our lives. And I think can be helpful just to think, if we pause for a moment and you think about this time we're going through, particularly, let's say, the last 3 months or so, maybe particularly the last few weeks. How have you been holding all of this? Have you been able to find balance and steadiness in the way you're dealing with, the fears and the worries and the wanting to do things and perhaps uncertainty and maybe some confusion, all of the things, all of the emotions and mind states that naturally arise, the conditions that are leading a third, 1 in 3 almost of the people of the country to be, to say I'm feeling, experiencing the symptoms of anxiety and depression. Those same things are affecting all of us in different ways, when none of us are kind of immune from what's happening right now. So think about what, how this time has been for you, and how balanced have you felt in this period, and how much, to what extent have these practices and these teachings and these skills been able to help you, help support you in these times? I've shared before the quote from the Vietnamese Zen teacher, great, wonderful teacher, founder really of a kind of engaged Buddhism and activist, poet, teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, he said, when the crowded Vietnamese refugee boats met with storms or pirates, if everyone panicked, all would be lost. But if even one person on the boat remained calm and centered, it was enough. It showed the way for everyone to survive. So you think of that as the power of equanimity, that if we can cultivate this quality in our own experience, it helps us to deal with the ups and downs of life in a balanced way, to find balance, to be able to see into the deeper truths of impermanence, that if we try and hold on to anything, we're going to suffer. If we try and resist the truth of how things are, we'll suffer. So once we really recognize the impermanence of things, that, that nothing really can be held on to, as the teachings tell us as well, that nothing is, there's not a permanent I or mine, that can hold on to anything, that nothing should be held on to as I or mine. When we see this kind of these characteristics of life and we begin to see them more deeply, what naturally arises is this quality of equanimity, of balance, of a kind of an evenness. In the Buddhist teachings, there's these what are called the 8 vicissitudes, but since we don't often use the term vicissitudes anymore, I had a vicissitude today. A better, kind of a more familiar way of saying it might be 8 worldly winds. These are the kind of the winds of life that'll blow through our lives inevitably, just by virtue of being human on this earth. We're going to experience these, and they're pleasure and pain, gain and loss, praise and blame, and fame and disrepute. These qualities of, like, both the kind of the good and the bad, the pleasure. Yes, we like pleasure. We tend to want more of it. But when we want to hold on to pleasure, and we try to, it goes through our fingers like water, that we can't hold on to it. And if we do, we suffer. If we try to, we suffer. Similarly, pain, we can't get rid of pain. We're going to experience it. We may, for a short term, do, what's necessary to kind of mitigate it. But pain is part of life. And if we can accept that, then we can experience freedom in the midst of, the joys and the sorrows of life. And similarly with the other of these worldly winds, gain and loss. Any of you who've had, investments, maybe a 401k or some other investments, pension in the stock market, and think of the volatility of the last few months. And, I think one day towards the end of last week, 7% of, drop in value in the Dow Jones. And so, if you looked at that could be, if you looked at it on paper, it could be like, $20,000 or $50,000, $100,000, whatever. And the mind can go, oh, fear, worry, what's that going to mean for my retirement, etc. And then the next day it could go up 10%. Oh, wonderful. And obviously what it is, numbers on a page, obviously it could have real impact depending on, when, etc. When you're going to buy and sell and all of those things. But we see how the mind can get kind of pulled in one way and pulled the other way. In the Carlos Castaneda's book, the Don Juan, the Yaqui sorcerer, the shaman, kind of wise being, a teacher, he said, for the spiritual warrior, someone who's committed to waking up, everything is a challenge. For the everyday person, everything is a blessing or a curse. That if we're caught up in the kind of the ups and downs of life, oh, this is terrible, oh, this is wonderful, we get blown one way or the other by the worldly winds. But for the spiritual warrior, someone who sees more deeply into life, the changes of life, the ups and the downs, the joys and the sorrows, there can be balance, there can be a steadiness in the midst of that, so that we don't get blown over when something, quote, bad happens, and we don't get kind of swept up in, over exuberance when something positive happens. We see this as kind of this is the flow of life, seeing life as a challenge rather than, life, seeing the changes as a challenge rather than a blessing or a curse. Rather than seeing something as inevitable or inveterate, is the way it is, but just of like, oh, how do I work with this? How do I hold all this? So equanimity, it's a core quality, a key quality within the teachings. It's one of the four what are called divine abodes, these what are beautiful qualities of heart, along with loving kindness, compassion, and sympathetic joy or spiritual joy. The fourth one is equanimity, that helps to balance these other qualities, helps to balance loving kindness, so that loving kindness towards all beings doesn't kind of morph into attachment or craving, which if we lose that larger kind of openness and intention of benefiting all beings, and we kind of crave, or want, get attached to wanting somebody or a kind of a narrower view, then we suffer. But equanimity helps balance that quality, helps balance compassion, so that it is reaching out and alleviating the suffering of others and ourselves, rather than thinking of others as, oh, those poor people, and pitying them, which is is not compassion. It's kind of like has in it that sense of separation. So equanimity has been this really essential quality within the teachings and the practices of Buddhism, of the Dharma. It's also one of the what are called the 7 awakening factors. These 7 qualities of heart and mind that are conducive to freedom. And I'll just name them here. I don't have time to kind of unpack those. Maybe another time we'll do that. But they're these beautiful qualities that we can cultivate and that actually lead us towards in the direction of freedom of the heart, of awakening. And the first one, begin with mindfulness and end, if you like, kind of the bookends, mindfulness, and end with equanimity. But and they kind of lead towards, each leads to the next one. Mindfulness, when we bring awareness to our experience, and as I'm talking now, you might just be aware of what's going on for you in the body and the mind and the heart. When we bring awareness to anything, it becomes really interesting. There's Henry Miller, the writer. He said, the moment one gives close attention to anything, even a blade of grass, it becomes a mysterious, awesome, indescribably magnificent world in itself. I think it's beautifully stated, that just the quality of paying attention to something kind of brings it to life in a way, just looking at a leaf or a flower or anything, of just like, oh, or even one's palm, of like, oh, well, that's really, kind of, And what mindfulness leads to, it naturally leads to, when we bring awareness to an experience, it leads to investigation, which is the second quality. We become interested, we become curious, we want to look further into it. Oh, yeah. So mindfulness leads to investigation, which in turn, that quality of investigation and curiosity, it gives rise to energy. You know, it energizes the being, it energizes the consciousness. And that energy gives rise, that's the third quality. And that energy gives rise to joy. It could be very bubbling joy, it could be a quieter kind of joy. But this kind of a natural arising from this energy in the being, in the heart and the mind, gives rise to joy. And when the joy, that kind of more effervescent joy, kind of quietens down, it gives rise to tranquility, the quality of calm, of ease, a sense of. And all of these qualities help us help the mind become more spacious, more balanced, more at ease, more filled with joy and calm. And the tranquility of the mind then helps the mind settle and become more concentrated, which is the sixth quality. The focus becoming attentive, focused, concentrated. And with the mind concentrated and one-pointed, if you like, what arises from that is equanimity, is this balance of this quality of steadiness of heart and mind. So this is a way, these teachings, these 7 factors, these qualities of an awakened or awakening mind, give rise to great freedom when we deepen these qualities, when we practice these qualities. So equanimity is a quality that we can cultivate, and we do cultivate it in our basic practice. So in a minute we'll be moving into the initial meditation. Will take about 15 minutes. Where we will invite that quality of openness, that quality of acceptance of what's arising. You know, maybe some of the things that come up as we meditate are not so easy or not so pleasant. Maybe difficult thoughts or emotions come up, but we see if we can make space for them, allow them to come and to kind of be there for however long they want to be there. And then when they're ready, to pass, just to see their impermanence, their changing quality, their changing nature. If we don't try to kind of hold on to the pleasant or push away the unpleasant, then they'll come and go. And we can deepen into this quality of equanimity. Of balance, of steadiness. So we can cultivate this quality. We can see that we have the capacity to hold both the joys and the sorrows, the difficulties, the pleasures and the pains, with a steadiness of heart and mind. So I think what we'll do is we'll move into the meditation and invite kind of a reflection as we come out of this initial reflection or talk. Invite you to just come into a posture that's relaxed and comfortable. Just take some moments to make any adjustments in your posture. So let your back be straight. You might invite the shoulders to relax. Let the chest be open so that you can breathe easily. And you don't have to hold a particular posture or tense your muscles to sit. So just be be present, sit, or if you prefer, if you're can easily lie down, you can do the meditation lying down or in a standing position if you choose to. But the main thing being relaxed and calm. Relax and just be aware of your experience. So if you like, let your attention come inward, let your eyes gently close. Or if you prefer to keep them open, you might do that with a soft, unfocused gaze. Either way, relaxing the eyes, letting the attention come more into the other senses, feeling, particularly the feelings in the body. So putting aside thoughts about the future or the past or what's going on anywhere else, and let your attention be here, and let your attention kind of drop down out of the thinking mode, out of the head, down into the body. Feel the body, feel the weight of your body pressing down on your buttocks, on your thighs. Feel the contact with the surface beneath you. Feel your feet touching the floor, contact of your feet with the floor. Feel the sensations of the body. See if you can feel them from the inside out. Feel the sensations in your hands. Pressure, maybe warmth, pulsing, tingling. Feel the sensations of your breathing. Just notice how the breath is right now. And as a way of inviting a calming of the body and the mind, you might consciously deepen your breathing. Let the breath be deeper. Take a nice deep in breath. Just holding it a moment and then releasing that long, slow out breath till all of the breath has been released. And then again, a nice full deep in breath, filling the chest, filling the lungs, like as though you're inflating a balloon. And then on the out breath, releasing, letting go. Imagine you're breathing out any stresses or tension or busyness, letting them go on the out breath. So on the in breath, filling the chest, filling the lungs, energizing on the in breath and relaxing on the out breath. So we bring energy into the body as we breathe in, and we relax as we breathe out. And these deeper breaths can help us shift out of the more tense, vigilant mode into the more relaxed mode of the nervous system. Out of fight or flight and into rest and digest. And then when you're ready in your own time, just letting the breath come back into its natural rhythm. Breathing in, breathing out. Another simple but can be quite effective way of settling and relaxing is to invite a smile to your face. So you might think about somebody who makes you feel happy or joyful, or a time or a place that you felt really peaceful, happy. And let that image come into your mind, into your heart. Invite the facial muscles into a smile or a half smile, particularly activating the muscles around the eyes and around the mouth. And the smile sends a message to our brain and our nervous system that we can relax, that we can kind of let down our guard, feel at home here. If you can, just inviting the smile down into the body, into the heart area. Just taking in any pleasant feelings in the body, in the mind. Just settling into being here, feeling your body in the space you are, feeling the space around you. Just feeling the connection with all of us here together in our separate places and spaces. Feel, if you can, that sense of connection and community. Just being together, practicing together. Committed to waking up and living more freely. Sensing that shared aspiration and intention. You might check in with the body, do a brief scan of the body and see if there's any area that could relax a little bit more. Be the shoulders, or the facial muscles, or the eye muscles, the chin and jaw. The torso, the chest and the belly. Just being here with a receptive awareness, just receiving whatever's present for you right now. See if you can meet whatever's here. Maybe there's some pleasant bodily feeling, or maybe there's some discomfort. Maybe there's a kind of a mood or emotion that feels a little troubling or difficult. See if you can meet whatever's kind of in the field right now with kindness and with acceptance. Can you make space for what is here right now? As the poet Rumi says, welcome the guests, whatever guests are present. Says, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who sweep your house empty of its furniture, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. Is it possible to meet what's here right now by making space for it, letting it come, letting it be, letting it go? Not having to struggle with what's here, not resisting if it's more difficult, not clinging or holding on if it's more pleasant or enjoyable. Not judging, thinking it should be different than it is. And whatever comes up, if resistance or holding or judging come up, not to make that a problem, but see if they too can be met with kindness and with acceptance. So that this, you could think of it as a container of receptive awareness, this kind awareness can hold whatever arises, whatever's coming up. Letting the breath be a focus for your attention, if that's helpful. This may be helpful in grounding you and helping you settle. Just aware of breathing in and breathing out. I finish with this poem called Singularity by Marie Howe, after Stephen Hawking. Do you sometimes want to wake up to the singularity we once were? So compact, nobody needed a bed or food or money. Nobody hiding in the school bathroom or home alone, pulling open the drawer where the pills are kept. For every atom belonging to me, as good belongs to you. Remember, there was no nature, no them. No tests to determine if the elephant grieves her calf or if the coral reef feels pain. Trashed oceans don't speak English or Farsi or French. Would that we could wake up to what we were when we were ocean, and before that to when sky was earth and animal was energy and rock was liquid and stars were space and space was not at all, nothing, before we came to believe humans were so important, before this awful loneliness. Can molecules recall it, what once was, before anything happened? No I, no we, no one, no was, no verb, no noun, only a tiny, tiny dot brimming with is, 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 all, everything, home. So I'll ring the bell in a moment and we'll break up into, have some breakout groups. And the invitation in the groups will be to just share a little, each person in turn, on how are you doing and how are you holding all that's coming up for you in these times. Just an opportunity to practice mindful speaking, mindful listening, supporting each other in our practice.